Before that moment at the traffic light, my life had already started unraveling. The signs had been there, scattered like puzzle pieces I had refused to assemble. Rachel had been acting distant for months, her laughter quieter, her affection colder. I told myself it was stress, exhaustion, maybe even midlife boredom. I didn't want to believe it was anything more. The first real warning came 2 weeks earlier, when Rachel had forgotten our anniversary. In nearly 2 decades together, she had never once missed it. We had never gone overboard with gifts or extravagant dinners, but we always acknowledged the day. Small gestures, heartfelt words. This year, she didn't even mention it. When I brought it up later, she looked genuinely surprised, like she had no idea what day it was. That moment should have been enough to make me dig deeper to ask harder questions, but I let it go. Then there was the phone. Rachel had never been the type to guard her devices, but lately her phone was practically glued to her. She used to leave it on the counter while cooking or charging in the bedroom overnight. Now it was always in her hand or tucked in her pocket. She had even started sleeping with it under her pillow. When I casually asked why, she laughed it off, claiming work had been hectic and she didn't want to miss important messages. It sounded reasonable enough, but the way she avoided my eyes told me otherwise. A week before that fateful day, I ran into one of Rachel's co-workers at the grocery store, a woman named Carla, who had always been friendly but not particularly chatty. That day, though, she hesitated before greeting me, her smile a little too forced. "Hey, Oliver," she had said, shifting her weight awkwardly. "How's everything going?" There was something in her tone, something almost apologetic, like she knew something I didn't. The conversation had been brief, but it left a bitter taste in my mouth. 3 nights before I found myself at that red light, Rachel had come home late, much later than usual. I had been waiting in the living room, pretending to scroll through my phone, but really just listening for the sound of her car. When she finally walked in, she barely glanced at me. "Long day," she muttered, before heading straight to the shower. Normally, she would have flopped onto the couch, kicked off her heels, and vented about office drama. That night, she just disappeared, upstairs like I wasn't even there. I should have confronted her then. I should have asked her outright where she had been, who she had been with, but I didn't. Maybe I was afraid of the answer. Maybe I already knew. Either way, I chose denial over truth, and so, nothing good ever comes from being where you don't belong. I learned that the hard way. But this time, it wasn't my fault. I was stopped at a red light, minding my business, when the driver next to me motioned to roll down my window. His face was partly hidden behind dark sunglasses, his arm draped over the door. "Hey, your tire's going flat," he said. Instinctively, I checked the dashboard. No warning lights. Still, something about his tone unsettled me. Better safe than sorry. I nodded, pulled into a nearby parking lot, and stepped out. Damn it. A screw was buried deep in the tread, air seeping out in a slow, steady hiss. Just great, with no better option. I headed into the store for a can of sealant. Back outside, I hesitated, then foolishly yanked the screw out. Bad move. Air rushed out fast. Panicking, I jammed it back in, hoping to slow the leak. I filled the tire at a nearby gas station and prayed it would last the 15 miles home. I kept a close eye on the pressure, ready to use the sealant if needed. 5 miles from home, I checked my side mirror. The tire was sagging again. I pulled into a convenience store, hoping for an air pump. No luck. With no choice, I twisted the sealant in place and squeezed. Green slime oozed out, but at least the hissing stopped just as I was about to get back in my car. I heard an engine. A massive lifted pickup rumbled into the lot. Something about it felt familiar, but I couldn't place it. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped a tall, blonde guy in jeans, cowboy boots, and a belt buckle the size of a dinner plate. The kind of guy who spent more time at rodeos than anywhere else. I might have laughed until the passenger door opened. She stepped out, Long black hair, effortless stride, the kind of confidence that turned heads. My stomach dropped. Rachel. My wife. What the hell? Neither of them noticed me. My work car was small, forgettable. I stood frozen as they walked hand in hand into the store, her laughter ringing through the air. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. It was like taking a punch to the gut. I just stood there watching like some pathetic idiot. Then it clicked. That truck. I'd seen it before parked outside the psychiatric clinic where Rachel worked. Italian restaurant. Intimate, warm, and quiet. We ate too much, lingered over wine, and talked for hours. I had no idea what would come next, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the past. I was looking forward. Jewel sat beside me in the booth, her body naturally leaning into mine. Without thinking, I draped an arm around her shoulders. She didn't hesitate, just melted into me, looking up with a soft smile. It was effortless, natural, and in that moment, it hit me. She would always be like this. Adorable, warm, the kind of person who could light up a room without even trying. That wasn't something time would take away. When I pulled into her driveway later that night, she turned to face me, her eyes flicking briefly to my lips before meeting mine again. She wanted me to kiss her. I wanted it even more. I leaned in, brushing my lips against hers. She tasted like red wine and cherry chapstick. The kiss was unhurried, deep, and impossibly sweet. When we finally pulled apart, I caught movement in the window. "I think we have an audience," I murmured. Jules giggled, Sabrina's giggle. Or maybe it was the other way around. "I'd be surprised if we didn't," she admitted. "You do realize they've been orchestrating this whole thing, right?" She blushed slightly. "Yeah, and you don't mind, do you?" I shook my head. "Not even a little." She smiled. "Me neither." I grinned. "We should probably get inside before they tear down the curtains." For the next 4 months, Friday nights became our thing. Dinner, adventure, sometimes just long walks where we talked about everything and nothing. I didn't rush her, but the connection between us deepened with every passing week. There were moments, charged, lingering moments, where I could tell she wanted more, and God knows I did too. At the same time, I realized how much I loved being with her, not just as her boyfriend, but as her friend. We talked constantly. She'd text me ridiculous jokes throughout the day, and I'd send her things I knew would make her laugh. She was the first person I thought of when something funny happened, and the only person I wanted to talk to when things weren't so great. Tuesday nights turned into family dinners. The 4 of us, me, Jules, Toby, and Sabrina, would cook together, play games, and just be. I wasn't just falling for Jules. I was falling for her daughter, too. They were so alike that knowing one felt like knowing the other, and yet their differences made them each their own kind of incredible. Life was good. The only thing that cast a shadow over it was Rachel. She was still part of Toby's life, which meant she was still lingering on the edges of mine. Every time I saw her, irritation flared. She was a constant reminder of a chapter I had already closed, but couldn't quite escape. She tried to force small talk whenever she picked up Toby or when I dropped her off at her grandparents' house. She was still living with them. She had lost her job at the clinic and was now working at another private practice across town. Whenever she started pushing too hard, I'd casually ask if she'd heard from Jerry. That always shut her up. One afternoon, she cornered me in the driveway. "How long is it going to take for you to forgive me?" she asked, her voice tight. I stared at her. "Forgive you for what?" "Exactly. As far as I can tell, you don't even think you did anything wrong." She flinched. "Not once have I heard you say." "I'm sorry, Oliver. I was wrong. I'm sorry I tried to make Toby believe you were lying. I'm Sorry I tried to take her away from you. I'm sorry I dragged you through a brutal divorce and made everything harder than it needed to be. I met her gaze. And most of all, not once have you ever said, I'm sorry I cheated on you and slept with that loser behind your back. Silence. You still can't own your mistakes, I said finally, so I don't even know what forgiveness would mean. The truth was, I had let it go. I didn't dwell on it anymore. I refused to waste my time mourning something that had already burned to the ground. People made bad choices all the time. They had the right to leave, to fall out of love, to make mistakes. But that didn't mean I had to carry the weight of them. For a brief moment, I had wanted revenge. I had wanted both of them to feel humiliated, to suffer the consequences of what they had done. But I moved past that quickly. Their punishment was simple. They had to live with themselves. Rachel was miserable. Jerry was long gone. And as much as I had wished for karma to hit them like a freight train, I realized I didn't need to do anything. Life had already handled it for me. She took it even harder when she found out about Jules. One night, after dropping Toby off at her grandparents', Rachel stopped me before I could get into my car. I heard you're dating one of Toby's friends' moms, she said. Arms crossed. I said nothing. Is it true? She pressed. I shrugged. Not your business. Her jaw tightened. Damn it, Oliver, I have a right to know. I let out a sharp laugh. No, you don't. You lost that right when you found your soulmate, remember? And guess what? It wasn't me. Then something happened. It's called a divorce. My life is mine now, so do us both a favor, Rachel. Stay out of... I walked away feeling lighter than I had in years. She just wouldn't let it go. When I told Toby about it, she was furious. From that moment on, she refused to let Rachel drop her off at our house. Her grandparents would pick her up and bring her home instead. Rachel's presence in my life was reduced to almost nothing, and that was exactly how I wanted it. 7 months after that first trip to the lake, I planned something special. Dinner at a nice restaurant, followed by a club. Jules wasn't a big drinker, maybe a beer now and then. But that night she ordered a second cocktail. I raised an eyebrow. Yes, Ollie, I'm wild and reckless tonight, she teased. I smirked. You're perfect as always. She tilted her head. That same cute little habit she always had. Do you really think so? Of course I do. And for the record, I think you're pretty perfect too. Her smile lingered for a moment before she got serious. If I'm so perfect, why haven't you invited me to stay the night? I definitely choked on my drink. Jules laughed, eyes sparkling. You haven't even thought about it, I swallowed, forcing my voice to work. Jules, I haven't thought about anything. Else since that first day on the boat, since I saw you in that damn bikini. She grinned. Good. I exhaled slowly. I didn't want to push, didn't want to rush anything. You won't scare me away, she said softly. I told the girls not to wait up for me. My pulse jumped. Really? I asked, a little breathless. She reached for my hand. So why are we still here? I stood, pulling her up with me. That night, as we drove home, she rested her head on my shoulder, her fingers interlaced with mine. When we pulled into the garage, I got out first and walked around to open her door. Jules stepped out, her body brushing against mine as we made our way inside. The air between us was charged, humming with the kind of anticipation that made everything else fade away. When we reached the bedroom, I turned her around at the foot of the bed. Then I kissed her. It was slow, deep, one of those kisses that made time lose all meaning. Her hands slid around my neck, pulling me closer as if she wanted to drown in the moment. When we finally broke apart, her brown eyes met mine dark, and full of emotion she held on to me, her voice barely a whisper. Make love to me, Oliver. Then, almost shyly, she admitted, I'm a little nervous. I brushed a hand along her cheek, my voice gentle. There's nothing to be afraid of. I paused, then added, I love you, Julie Barnes. You know that, right? She exhaled, as if she'd been holding that breath for too long. I thought so, she murmured, but I needed to hear it. So I said it again. I love you. She smiled, her fingers tightening in my hair. I love you too, Oliver. I pulled her closer, my fingers tracing the zipper of her dress before slowly sliding it down. My knuckles brushed against her spine, making her shiver as goosebumps rose beneath my touch. When I reached the small of her back, I traced slow circles there, watching as another tremor ran through her. Her skin was soft, warm, like silk beneath my fingertips. The dress slid from her shoulders, cascading over her curves and pooling at her feet. She wasn't wearing a bra. She didn't need one. I sat on the edge of the bed, taking in the sight of her. She was breathtaking. She stood before me in nothing but delicate blue lace, an image so stunning it stole my breath. I reached for her, pulling her against me, pressing my cheek to the smooth plane of her stomach as my hand settled on the curve of her hips. That was when my restraint snapped. I undressed quickly, nearly tearing the buttons from my shirt and my eagerness to feel her against me. When I was down to nothing but my shorts, I scooped her up with ease. She was so small, impossibly light, and carried her to the bed. As the night unfolded, our bodies intertwined, moving in sync, lost in the rhythm of something that felt bigger than us both. She was fire, wild and free, meeting me with everything she had. By the time we finally collapsed together, tangled in the sheets, she rested against my chest, her breath warm against my skin. I pressed lazy kisses to her forehead, her temple, her lips, murmuring words neither of us fully understood. Sleep came, but only briefly. Twice more that night we found each other again, once at my insistence and once at hers. When I woke the next morning, she was sprawled across me, her cheek resting against my chest, her hair spilling over both of us like a golden veil. I ran my fingers through the soft strands, watching as she slowly stirred. Her eyes fluttered, open, still hazy with sleep. She stretched, pressing herself against me with a contented sigh. My place is here, Ollie, she murmured. I smiled. I know. She blinked up at me, half awake. Wait, do you mean like living together? I smirked. No, honey. Then I paused. Well, yes. But what I really mean is, will you marry me, Julie Barnes? Her eyes widened instantly. Then she lifted her left hand between us and wiggled her fingers. Nope, she teased. Something's missing. I chuckled. Hold that thought. She giggled, but then groaned. I can hold the thought, but I can't hold anything else. I need to pee. Laughing, I gave her a light smack on her bare A, making her yelp. Go then, meet me back here. She darted out of the room, disappearing down the hallway. I made a quick detour to my office, stopping by the bathroom before heading to the safe. Inside was what I needed, what I had been holding on to for the right moment. When I returned to the bedroom, she was curled up beneath the blankets, waiting. I climbed in beside her, taking her hand in mine, and looked into those deep brown eyes. Julie, I said softly, will you marry me? I slid the ring onto her finger. It was slightly loose. We'd have to get it resized, but for now it was perfect. She held it up, turning it under the light. It's beautiful, she whispered. Then she frowned slightly. It looks old. Where did you get this? I smiled. Remember when I told you I was going? To that auction last month? She nodded. Yeah, the estate sale. Well, what I didn't tell you, I said, watching her reaction, was that I went there specifically for this ring and to ask you this question. Her breath caught. This was made in England sometime around 1810, I continued. It once belonged to the Duchess of Avon. Her fingers brushed over the intricate setting, all lighting up her face. Ollie, this is the most beautiful ring I've ever seen. I chuckled. That's Great, but you still haven't answered my question. Her eyes snapped up to meet mine, then widened in realization. Oh, she gasped, laughing. Yes, yes, Oliver, I'll marry you. I grinned, pulling her into my arms, kissing her deeply. She suddenly stiffened, pulling back just enough to look at me. We need to tell the girls, I groaned, dropping my head onto her shoulder. Can we just enjoy this for 5 minutes before they start planning the wedding? She laughed, pressing her lips to my forehead. Ollie, you know they already have it planned. I sighed dramatically. You're right, she smirked. Of course I am. With one last kiss, she reached for her phone, and just like that, the next chapter of our lives began. The guy's name surfaced. Jerry Garner, a social worker there. Why wasn't Rachel at work? I needed answers. When they came out, coffee cups in hand, lost in their own little world, he opened the truck door for her, helped her in like a gentleman, then climbed in himself. I followed at a distance. They didn't go to a hotel, not a bar. They went to my house. I watched Jerry pull into the garage before I could process it. The door slid shut, cutting me off. My knuckles turned white around the steering wheel. My mind spun, refusing to believe what I was seeing. I sat there, stunned, until the thought of my tire snapped me back. It was holding air for now. 2 hours later, the garage door opened. They drove off. I grabbed a file from my passenger seat, pretending to read. Not that they would have noticed. She was angled toward him, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Rachel wouldn't be home until 5. It was barely 2. I had just enough time. I had to go inside. I needed proof. The house was eerily quiet. The only sound was the slow drip from Toby's bathroom faucet, the one I'd meant to fix for weeks. The air conditioning hummed, sending a chill down my spine, but I still felt overheated, like I was burning from the inside out. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. Upstairs, the bed was neatly made. Fresh sheets, my stomach twisted. I slid down the wall, head resting against the drywall. I felt hollow. There was only one conclusion. For 30 minutes, I sat there, my mind refusing to accept reality. It felt surreal, like I'd stumbled into some twisted nightmare. Nausea clawed at my stomach. I forced myself up, staggered to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on my face. The coolness helped until I noticed something. The shower floor was wet. They had showered here together. I stumbled back, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. My gaze shifted to the bed. This wasn't just my bedroom, it was a crime scene. I had no idea what I was going to do. Well, that wasn't entirely true. I was divorcing Rachel, that much was certain. But beyond that, I had no clue where to start. I didn't know a single lawyer, didn't know how any of this worked, and I still had to pick up Toby from school. Toby! What the hell was I supposed to tell her? As I drove, my head throbbed. My body felt leaden, and I was sure I looked like hell. But I couldn't leave Toby waiting. She was the only person I could still trust. As I pulled into the school parking lot, I spotted her instantly. Standing near, the entrance, the afternoon sun catching the dark waves of her hair, she walked toward the car with an effortless ease, carefree in a way I'd never be again. She looked so much like Rachel. Same olive skin, same deep brown hair, but her eyes, hazel shifting between gold and green, were uniquely hers. I'd never seen another pair like them. Sliding into the front seat, she tossed her backpack into the back. She turned to greet me but froze. Dad, what happened? Her sharp eyes scanned my face. You look sick. Is something wrong? Is Mom okay? I had to answer. I'm fine, kitten. I forced a smile. No one's hurt, no one's sick, but we need to talk. She frowned. Toby, let's go to the park first. Just let me hold you for a minute, okay? No questions until we get there. She hesitated. Okay, but you're scaring me. I know, I admitted, but I promise we'll be okay. I just hoped I wasn't lying. The 5-minute drive. felt like an eternity. This park held years of memories. Pushing her on swings, watching her play, believing we were a happy family. Had my entire life been a lie? As we walked toward an old bench, Toby slipped her hand into mine, a habit from childhood. Such a small gesture, but it hit me hard. We sat. "Just tell me, Dad," she said softly. "I can take it." I exhaled. "I don't know if I can." And then I broke. Words spilled out what I'd seen, how it felt, how the ground had tilted beneath me. My voice cracked. Tears burned down my cheeks. But she never let go of my hand. She held on, steady and strong. When I finally fell silent, she leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. "That's really bad, Dad," she said quietly. "But we need to talk to Mom." "It looks awful, but we don't know everything yet. We need the truth." I kissed the top of her head, my chest tight with pride. She was braver than I was. She tugged my hand. "Come on, want to drive?" I asked. For a second, her eyes lit up. She'd just gotten her learner's permit, but reality sank in and her excitement faded. Still, she nodded. She drove carefully, every move precise. When we pulled into the driveway, Rachel's car was already in the garage. She was home. Rachel greeted us at the door, smiling like everything was normal, like she wasn't a liar, a cheater, a fraud. "Hey, you two feel like takeout tonight?" My treat. Toby didn't hesitate. "Actually, we need to talk." Rachel's smile faltered. "Oh, okay. Is everything all right, sweetheart?" Toby's expression stayed unreadable. "I don't know. Let's find out." We moved to the living room. I sat next to Toby on the couch while Rachel settled into the overpriced armchair she'd insisted on buying. She glanced between us. "What's going on?" I folded my arms. "How was your day?" She tilted her head. "Busy at the office. One of the reps brought lunch." "Why?" "So you were at work all day?" Toby asked evenly. Rachel's gaze sharpened. "Yes." "Why?" I leaned forward. "You weren't at the house this afternoon with Jerry Garner?" The color drained from her face. "What?" She forced a laugh. "Of course not." "Are you accusing me of something, Oliver? I saw you." Her mouth opened, then shut. Then, "No, you didn't. You must be mistaken." She turned to Toby. "Sweetheart, he's confused. I was at work all day. You can ask Angel." Toby's voice was firm. "No, I won't ask Angel. She'd cover for you. But I could ask David Jones. He's your boss, right? What's his number?" Rachel's face darkened. "He worked the night shift. He's probably sleeping." She crossed her arms. "Is this a setup? What do you think I did?" "I think you trapped yourself," I said, "and we both know you're lying." "Why?" Her mind raced. "Not fast enough." "Fine," she finally admitted. "I was home. But this? This is why I didn't tell you. I knew you'd jump to conclusions." "No one accused you of anything," Toby shot back. "But now I am. You made Dad look crazy to protect yourself." "Why? What are you hiding? Are you having an affair with Jerry?" Rachel flinched. "You don't even know him." Toby's eyes narrowed. "Then why did you call him an idiot just now?" Rachel froze. Toby pressed on. "I've met him twice. He creeps me out, but that's not the point." "Answer the question. Are you having an affair with him?" Rachel's eyes darted between us, searching for an escape. "I didn't want it to come out like this," she whispered. "Come out." "How?" Toby asked, voice cold. Rachel inhaled sharply. "I love him." She turned to me, pleading. "I'm sorry, Oliver. I never meant for this to happen. We work together every day, and over time, I don't know. He's like the missing piece of my soul. We just connected. I was going to tell you when the time was right. Once we both get divorced, we're getting married. I'm sorry you found out this way." She reached for Toby. "But everything will be okay. You'll still see your dad. Jerry has a beautiful house on the lake. He has a daughter, too. He really likes you, and we'll all be happy. Are you insane? Toby shot to her feet. I'm not living with that creep. He looks at me like I'm something to eat. And you're right. I will see Dad whenever I want, because I'm living with him. It's you I won't be seeing anymore. How could you do this? Without waiting for a response, Toby spun on her heel and stormed upstairs. A second later, her bedroom door slammed, the lock clicking into place. Rachel sighed and turned to me. She'll adjust, she said, as if she actually believed it. Jerry's a good guy, Oliver. Once you get to know him, you'll see that. I know this. It's hard, but I have to do what makes me happy, and Jerry makes me happy. She shrugged like that was all that mattered. Like it was that simple. I just stared. The woman standing before me looked like Rachel, but she wasn't the person I had married. She was someone else, cold, detached, unrecognizable, and I had no interest in arguing with a stranger. Whatever you say, Rachel. My voice was hollow. When are you leaving? Her brows lifted. Leaving? Why would I? Jerry's still married, so we have to handle the divorces first before. Making any big moves? No, I said, firm and final. You're moving out. You have 3 days. She blinked, then scoffed. Excuse me, you can't just throw me out. This is my house, too. If anyone should leave, it's you. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. You're forgetting something. I bought this house before we got married. My name is the only one on the deed. Legally, it belongs to me, not us. Just me. I met her eyes. So no, Rachel, you are leaving. Panic flickered across her face. And where exactly am I supposed to go? You're really just kicking me out like I'm nothing. I shrugged. Not my problem. Maybe check into one of those motels where people like you do their dirty work. Her eyes glistened. That's cruel, Oliver, she whispered. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't choose to fall for Jerry. It just happened. We connected. A humorless laugh escaped me. Oh, so you tripped and fell into love? Like a kid running with scissors and stabbing himself in the eye? My mother warned me about that. Guess I finally get it now. She scowled. You don't have to be sarcastic. Why can't you just accept that Jerry and I love each other? I tilted my head. Maybe because just this morning, before I left for work, you told me you loved me. And now in a single day, you're telling me you love him. Call me crazy, but that's a little confusing. Her voice softened. I do love you, Oliver. I always have. But I'm in love with Jerry. Oh, I see, I said, my tone mocking. For 18 years you told me every day you were in love with me, but I guess I hallucinated that she reached for my hand. We were in love. I yanked my hand away. You have 3 days, Rachel. If you're not out by then, I'll have the sheriff remove your things. Her lips trembled. Please, Oliver, we can still be friends. Jerry even wants to be your friend. We have to think about Toby. No matter what happens, she needs both of us. I don't want to lose you completely. Something inside me hardened. The sadness, the heartache, it all burned away, leaving only ice. You must be out of your mind, I said, voice low and steady. Friends with you, with him. Never. She flinched. But I wasn't done. Tell that sorry excuse for a man to stay out of my way, and as for you, you are nothing to me now. You have 3 days. After that, I never want to see your face again. First thing in the morning, I'm calling a lawyer. You'll get your divorce faster than you expected. I turned and walked away. She tried to follow, babbling about maturity and handling things peacefully, but I was done listening. I went straight to our bedroom, grabbed her things from the closet, and dumped them in the spare room. She hovered behind me, helpless as I tossed her clothes onto the bed. Eventually, she stopped arguing and started sorting through her belongings. The moment she was distracted, I slipped out and locked the door behind me. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Toby. Are you okay, Dad? Me. Yeah. Kitten. You. Toby. Not really, but I'll be okay. Me. All right, I love you. Let me know if you need anything. Toby. Can you take me to school tomorrow? I don't want to ride with her. Me. Of course. I collapsed onto the bed but barely slept. I stared at the ceiling for hours, trying to figure out my next move. Sometime around 3, exhaustion won, and I dozed off. The alarm jolted me awake, reality crashing down all over again. I dragged myself into the shower, letting the scalding water burn away the haze. Once dressed, I called my boss. I need a few days off, I said flatly. I'm filing for divorce. He didn't ask questions, just told me to take whatever time I needed. I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table in silence. After a while, I made breakfast for Toby and me. She came downstairs looking tired but steady and ate without a word. Rachel entered a few minutes later, pretending nothing had changed. She poured herself coffee and tried to make small talk. Neither of us responded. When we finished eating, I stood. Time to go. Rachel turned to Toby. Are you ready? Toby didn't even glance at her. Instead, she looked straight at me. Are you ready, Dad? I jingled my keys. She grabbed her backpack. Rachel sighed. Fine. Act like children if that makes you feel better. We ignored her. She huffed, snatched her purse, and stormed out. I didn't watch her go. She was already gone to me. Dropping Toby off at school felt like peeling off a layer of my soul. She hesitated before getting out, then leaned over and kissed my cheek. A small gesture, but one that grounded me. I watched her disappear through the doors, then exhaled sharply, gripping the steering wheel. My mind was a storm. Dan. I needed to call Dan. He'd been through this mess recently. Maybe he had some insight. Scrolling through my contacts, I found his name and hit dial. He picked up immediately. Hey man, what's up? I need a lawyer, I said. A beat of silence, then a long sigh from his end. Crap. You okay? Not even close, I admitted. Who handled your divorce? Not mine, Dan said without hesitation. Go with my ex's lawyer. She destroyed me. That's exactly what I need. Give me her name. He did. I pulled up the number and called the firm. A receptionist put me on hold before I could finish my first sentence. When she came back, I laid out the situation. She scheduled me for an afternoon consultation. That gave me time to make some preemptive moves. Rachel and I had investments I couldn't touch yet, but I could set limits elsewhere. First step, slashing our credit card limits to $500. I wasn't about to bankroll whatever fantasy life she was building with Jerry. Elizabeth Baxter, divorce attorney, rubbed me the wrong way immediately. The moment I sat down, she arched a brow. Leaving your wife for someone younger. I stared at her. Not even close. She's the one who cheated with a married co-worker. Now they're both planning their happily ever after. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. Apologies. I don't represent cheaters. If I did, I wouldn't sleep at night. I leaned forward. Well, lucky for both of us, she's the guilty one. Her demeanor shifted into business mode. What do you want out of this? My daughter, I said without hesitation. She's my priority. Can I get full custody? Baxter folded her hands on the desk. Legally, both parents are considered equal, but in reality, courts favor the mother, especially with daughters. How old is she? Does she want to live with you? She's 15. And yes, she's made it clear she wants to stay with me. That got a nod of approval. That helps. Kids over 14 have a say in custody rulings, and judges usually honor their wishes. If she were younger, this would be an uphill battle. But with her age and preference, I don't see an issue. I met her gaze. Good. Make it happen. She nodded. Just like that, the wheels were in motion. Driving home, I focused on my next steps. I wasn't going to play the sufferer in this mess. I needed strategy. First, Jerry's wife. She had no idea what was coming, just like I hadn't. She deserved the truth. Second, Rachel's parents. They had always treated me like family. They adored Toby, but breaking the news needed tact. Your daughter's a lying, cheating snake wasn't the best approach. Third, mutual friends. Rachel and Jerry weren't going to control the narrative. People needed to know the truth, and I was more than happy to deliver it. Social media seemed like a good place to start. Rachel managed our shared Facebook account, but I knew my way around the settings. A quick password reset, and I was in. Then I searched for Jerry's wife. She had an account. Perfect. I took screenshots, pictures of Rachel and Jerry looking a little too comfortable. Then I crafted a simple, effective announcement on Rachel's page. Rachel and I are divorcing. She has found her true love in Jerry. I attached the photo, posted it, changed the password, and logged out. Now I waited. I didn't expect immediate fallout, but it didn't take long. 2:07 p.m. Rachel's name flashed across my screen. I answered. "You're an unbelievable a-hole," she snapped. Her anger was music to my ears. "You couldn't just leave this alone, could you?" she hissed. "I know you blocked me. Take the post down, Oliver. Jerry's wife doesn't know yet. My parents are freaking out. My friends won't stop calling. You're making this worse than it needs to be." I didn't hesitate. "No," her voice sharpened. "What are you? A child? Take it down," I smirked. "You should be grateful, Rachel. Now you don't have to hide. Everyone gets to celebrate your love story." She exhaled sharply. "Are you trying to humiliate me?" I laughed. "Oh, so you're embarrassed. You don't like people knowing what you did. That's rich." Silence. For a moment I thought she had hung up. Then, softer, she murmured, "Oliver, it wasn't supposed to happen this way." Bitterness cut through me. "You lost the right to decide how this played out the second you made your choice. You don't get sympathy. You don't get kindness. You don't even get basic courtesy anymore. You're nothing to me now, Rachel. Get used to it." I ended the call. Seconds later, my phone rang again. I didn't bother answering. I had more important things to do. Time to pick up Toby on the drive home. I told her about my conversation with Elizabeth Baxter. She looked relieved about staying with me, but something in her expression lingered. "What's wrong?" I asked. She frowned. "What's wrong with her, Dad?" I glanced over. "Who?" "Elizabeth." "No, Mom." She shook her head. "I love her. I really do. But she's always been off. I don't think she ever felt like a real adult. Not like you. It always seemed like you had two kids, her and me. Did you ever notice that?" I hesitated. Not in those exact words. But yeah, she's always been impulsive. I just never thought she'd do something like this. Toby sighed, staring out the window. "Guess we'll just have to deal with it." Then her expression hardened. "Dad, I never want to be alone in the same house with that fool. Ever. I don't care what you have to do. Just make sure it doesn't happen." I gripped the steering wheel. "I promise I won't let that happen." We stopped for pizza on the way home. I just started my second slice when my phone rang. Rachel's dad, Bob, the conversation I'd been dreading. Toby met my gaze. "It's Grandpa," I said. "Put it on speaker." She sat up straighter. Bob didn't waste time. "Oliver, Rachel showed up last night asking to stay with us. Care to explain?" I kept my voice steady. "Did you ask her?" she said. "You threw her out." I did a pause. "And why is that?" I exhaled. "She's having an affair with Jerry Garner. They had a whole plan. He'd divorce his wife, she'd divorce me, and they'd be together." Silence. Then finally, Bob's voice came stunned. "What? How do you know?" I saw them and she admitted it. He sounded shaken. "Are you sure you heard right?" Toby jumped in. "Grandpa, it's me. I was there. I heard everything. I'm so sorry. I love you." Bob's voice cracked. "Don't cry, love bug. Stay strong, all right? We love you." We'll talk to your mom. A moment passed before he sighed. Oliver, are you still there? I'm here. His voice was heavy. I'm sorry, son. I don't even know what to say. I steadied myself. Just know that nothing changes for Toby. You and your wife will always be her grandparents, and I get that you love Rachel. You have to do what you have to do. I just hope you won't end up hating me. His response was firm. That'll never happen. I'll get to the bottom of this. Call me if you need anything. It went better than expected. No need to detail the mess. Anyone who's seen a divorce knows how brutal it is. Rachel somehow stayed in denial, convinced she had a shot at custody. She didn't. Elizabeth Baxter was ruthless. The judge awarded me full custody, citing Toby's age and clear preference. Rachel got visitation on one condition. Toby could never be alone with her and Jerry. Not that it mattered. Turns out Jerry wasn't the soulmate, Rachel thought. His wife divorced him, and within 2 weeks, he had moved on to someone else. So much for true love. Rachel's grand plan collapsed. 7 months in, Rachel blindsided me. She requested marriage counseling. The judge granted it 8 to 10 sessions. Our therapist, Mr. Rodman, looked like he moonlit in drum circles. Long gray ponytail, round glasses, full retired hippie energy. At the first session, he asked us to state our goals. Rachel launched into self-discovery, happiness, fate, the whole spiel. She truly believed the universe owed her some grand love story. Then he turned to me. Mr. Berryman, what are your goals for these sessions? I leaned back to get through them. Rodman frowned. Don't you think it's important to work through the issues that led to this? I smiled dryly. See, that's the thing. I didn't create this situation, Mr. Rodman, and I'm fine with my own issues. I plan to keep them. Rachel gasped. Rodman looked scandalized. Oliver, how are we supposed to fix things if you won't even discuss them? She demanded. I shrugged. Not my problem. Rodman cleared his throat. You do realize if I report to the judge that you're refusing to cooperate, you could be held in contempt? I smirked. You mean if you lie? These sessions are recorded, right? I'm here. I'm answering questions. That's cooperation. His face reddened. I believe the judge expected effort. I'm not responsible for the judge's expectations, I said coolly. Just my own. Rodman assigned homework, forced time together outside of sessions. Rachel saw it as a chance to wear me down. One evening, she asked, Oliver, what would it take for you to drop the divorce and actually try? I didn't look up an act of God. She waited. I didn't elaborate. Finally, she pressed. What do you mean? I met her eyes. Unless you can turn back time and erase Jerry from existence, that would do it. Other than that, only God has that power. Have you developed any supernatural abilities, Rachel, besides attracting married men? She didn't ask again. The sessions dragged on, repetitive and pointless. Eventually, mercifully, they ended. The judge looked between us. Have you made any progress? Elizabeth didn't hesitate. Your Honor, my client has no interest in reconciliation. We request the divorce be finalized immediately. The judge agreed. 10 days later. The paperwork arrived. It was over. Toby still saw her mother, spent time with her grandparents. Rachel planned outings and Toby went. But it wasn't the same. Something had shifted. Her world had changed, and I was grateful to be part of it. Her social life took center stage, and one friend in particular practically lived at our house. A small, energetic blonde named Sabrina, sharp-witted, endlessly cheerful, and about as adorable as a kitten. Before I realized it, they had started dragging me into their plans. One favorite water skiing. We had a boat, and once summer hit, Saturdays became lake days. Then one Monday, they pitched something bigger. Can we take the van and spend the whole weekend at the lake? Toby asked, eyes hopeful. My social calendar wasn't exactly overflowing, so I agreed. That was all they needed. By Thursday, they had everything packed and planned to the last detail. Friday afternoon, as I was finishing up the final loading, a bright red Jeep Cherokee rolled into the driveway. Sabrina hopped out first, her usual bundle of energy. But then another figure stepped out from the driver's side, someone who looked strikingly similar to her. I barely had time to process my confusion before Toby sprinted toward the woman, throwing her arms around her. The next thing I knew, Toby and Sabrina were leading her over to me. The woman looked nervous. "Dad," Toby said, shifting awkwardly. "This is Julie. She's Sabrina's mom. I know you haven't met her yet." Julie extended her hand, a warm but slightly uncertain smile on her face. "Hey, Oliver, the girls have told me a lot about you. Thank you for including me this weekend. Honestly, I was getting a little jealous that they spent so much time with you and not with me." There was something teasing in her tone, and in that moment I understood exactly where Sabrina got her personality from. I glanced at Toby, who gave me a very pointed look. My stomach did something weird, something I wasn't expecting. Then I made the mistake of glancing at Sabrina. She raised an eyebrow, daring me to object. "Oh, this was a setup. This will be great," I said, trying to gather my thoughts. "We always have an amazing time at the lake." Julie narrowed her eyes slightly, scanning my face. Then she looked between the two grinning teenagers, and realization hit her like a truck. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God, you didn't tell him, did you?" Before either of them could answer, she was engulfed in a flurry of hugs, kisses, and rapid-fire pleading. "Mom, please don't be mad," Sabrina begged. "This is going to be so much fun." "Julie, it's fine," Toby added. "Dad will love you just as much as I do, and he's a great guy." Julie finally broke free from their grasp, stepping back and holding up a hand. "Both of you go sit on the porch now." They hesitated. Now, with exaggerated sighs, they obeyed. Sulking toward the porch, Julie exhaled and turned to me. I swear I had no idea. "This is God. This is so awkward. I'm going to grab Sabrina and we'll head out. She's grounded for a month. I cannot believe they did this." She looked so thoroughly embarrassed that without thinking, I stepped forward and pulled her into a hug. She stiffened at first, but after a beat, she relaxed. "Yeah, it's awkward. I admit it. They're little troublemakers. But you and I both know they didn't do anything wrong." I studied her face for a moment. "Let me guess. You're single?" Julie looked up at me and let out a soft laugh. "That's not the problem here," I smirked. "I think it is. You packed a bag, cleared your weekend. You're already here. The lake is going to be great. And I promise, I'm not a terrible person." I shot her a conspiratorial grin. We could even mess with them a little. She glanced over at the girls who were practically vibrating with anticipation on the porch. Then, after a pause, she smiled. "You know what?" she said. "Let's do it." I turned and gave the girls a thumbs up. Instantly, they bolted toward us, excited squeals filling the air. But before they could get away with anything, I grabbed each of them by the arms. "All right, you little masterminds," I said, narrowing my eyes. That was not cool. Sabrina, ever the quick thinker, giggled, and in the deepest villainous voice she could muster, said, "I'm not nice." That was it. I lost it. Laughter exploded between us, and any hope of scolding them properly vanished. "We know what you were trying to do," I told them. "You cannot just manipulate people's lives like this." "But I love Julie," Toby whined. "And I didn't know how to introduce you to her." "You could have just told me," I pointed out. She looked momentarily guilty. "It's okay, kitten," I reassured her. "Just don't do it again." Her face brightened instantly. Sabrina grabbed my hand, practically bouncing in place. "Can we go now?" "It's going to be amazing, Oliver, you'll see," Julie laughed. "That really should be the official definition of cool, Oliver." She glanced up at the sky. She's right, though. We're losing daylight. With that, we grabbed her bags, loaded up the last of our gear, and hit the road. The lake was only 1 2-hour drive, with one quick stop for propane along the way. Julie sat up front with me while the girls took control of the music, forcing us to endure a playlist so horrendous it almost felt like a personal attack. As the miles rolled by, I learned a lot about Julie. She ran her own insurance agency and worked as a financial planner, which explains Sabrina's sharpness. She was also 3 years younger than me. Not a huge gap, but still something that surprised me. She was small, maybe just over 5 feet, with light brown hair that cascaded down her back. Her skin had a sun-kissed glow and her eyes deep brown. Warm, expressive, held a sharpness that hinted at intelligence and humor. She had a naturally elegant way about her, effortless in a way that made me wonder if she even realized it. And then there was her laugh. Light, genuine, contagious. I caught myself glancing at her more than I probably should have. By the time we pulled into the lake's parking area, it was clear this weekend was going to be very interesting. A few miles down the lake, the girls were ready to hit the water. They peeled off their oversized t-shirts, giggling and goofing around as they prepared to ski. It was all familiar, comfortable. Then I turned and saw Julie, and suddenly nothing was familiar anymore. She had always been small, but seeing her in a bikini made me realize just how petite she really was. And yet every inch of her was unmistakably feminine. The way her swimsuit hugged her figure made my brain short-circuit. She wasn't flashy or trying to be seductive. She was just effortless, toned, compact, stunning in a way that shouldn't have been legal. Then she turned and caught me, looking. Instead of being embarrassed, she smirked and winked. I swallowed hard. I had no business thinking about her this way. None at all. But damn if my brain wasn't betraying me. "You know what you look like?" I finally managed to say, trying to play it off. Julie cocked her head, grinning. "What, Oliver?" I shook my head with a laugh. "A problem?" She laughed, walking over to sit beside me, close enough to keep an eye on the girls, but also close enough that I could feel her presence. The next few hours were pure chaos in the best way. The girls tore up the water, showing off every trick. They knew. Julie, as it turned out, was just as talented, graceful, and controlled, carving through the waves like she belonged there. When it was my turn, she took the wheel, handling the boat with practiced ease. I wasn't anywhere near their level, but I held my own. Physics was just not on my side. By the time we made it back to the campsite, the sun was dipping low and everyone was starving. The girls insisted on cooking outside, so we fired up the camp stove and grill. I handled the sausages while they worked on the sides, potatoes, onions, and cans of pork and beans. There was something about food cooked outdoors that always made it taste better. We sat at one of the picnic tables the park provided, and within an hour it felt like we had known each other forever. Julie quickly became Jules. That's what the girls called her, and she decided she liked it. Somehow I ended up as Ollie. The girls kept casually bringing up how Jules wasn't married, and after a while I just asked outright, "Okay, I have to ask how." I gestured at her. "You're smart, gorgeous, hilarious, and you run your own business. How is it that some guy hasn't locked you down already?" She went quiet for a moment, then sighed. "Sabrina is the main reason," she admitted. "I was young and stupid. I thought I had met my forever person in college. Right before graduation, I found out I was pregnant. At first, it wasn't terrible. We talked about getting married as soon as we finished school." I caught the past tense. That didn't happen, did it? Jules shook her head. Not even close. 3 days after I told Brad, I found out he had been cheating on me for over a month, so I walked away and never looked back. When Sabs was born, I didn't have time for dating. Then when I finally got my business off the ground, I was just content. I had her, and I realized she was the best thing that ever happened to me. I didn't need anything else. Nodded. I get it. Toby is my everything. She's the only thing that's kept me sane these last 18 months. Jules reached over and placed a small hand on my shoulder. I know, she said gently. She tells Sabs and me everything. I'm so sorry, Ollie. Yeah, I muttered. Life has a way of kicking you in the teeth sometimes. We both sighed at the same time, then looked up and saw two very smug teenagers watching us from their chairs. They were whispering, but loudly. I turned back to Jules. I love your daughter, I told her honestly. She practically lives with us at this point. Feels like she's almost mine. Jules smiled softly. She loves you too. The other day, she told me, Ollie is the dad I never had. Something tightened in my chest. I looked at Jules, and her deep brown eyes shimmered with tears. A single drop slid down her cheek before she could stop it. Without thinking, I reached over and brushed it away with the back of my finger. She's an incredible girl, I murmured, and she has an incredible mother. Jules smiled through her tears, stood, kissed me on the cheek, and went to join the girls. The weekend was perfect, and when Sunday rolled around, I knew I couldn't just let her drive away without saying something. So as she was loading up the Jeep, I walked up and knocked on the window. She rolled it down, raising an eyebrow. Ollie, would you? I hesitated, then pushed through. Would you think about going out with me next Friday? Before she could respond, Sabrina shrieked from the passenger seat. Jules laughed, shaking her head. What time? 6, I suggested. Dinner. Maybe something else. Also, can Toby stay with Sabs while we're out? Jules smirked. That's very tempting. She tilted her head. And yes, absolutely. She leaned out and kissed me on the cheek before pulling away. When I got inside, Toby was already waiting, arms crossed. Well, she demanded, did you ask her out? Did you kiss her? I grabbed her in a hug and swatted her playfully. Yes, and none of your business, she squealed, bouncing like an excited puppy. I knew it, Dad. She's perfect for you. I love her so much, and Sabs is like a sister to me. I chuckled. What happens, happens, Toby. You can't force these things. She scoffed. Dad, let's be honest. You weren't going to do anything unless I pushed you. I couldn't even argue with that. I hugged her tighter. You know you'll always have a place in my heart that no one else can touch, right? You're my baby. That's never changing. She purred happily, then skipped off. Mission accomplished. Our first date went better than I could have imagined. I took her to play racquetball, and even though she'd never played before, her tennis background made her annoyingly good. She was ridiculously fast, darting around the court like she had extra gears. I didn't. Afterward, we sat at a table outside, catching our breath. She pulled out her phone. Smile, she said. I barely had time to react before she snapped a picture. Seconds later, the girls' responses started rolling in. We had officially made a memory. That night, I took her to a small